Okay, so you've either just finished watching the show or are thinking about watching the show, but you're wondering if you should read the book. Let's talk about the three body problem. I'm going to start off by saying that when I first saw the three body problem was coming out, like on Netflix, I had, put in my queue, say, okay, yeah, I want to watch this, I want to check it out, whatever. And saw the trailers, I was interested, but then I also saw that it was based off of a book. And I seem to be a person who leans toward that books tend to be the better way, the better version of a story. That, you have to cut a lot of stuff out, cut out a lot of fat, and you might miss things that you when it's a TV show that you didn't get from reading the book. So my thought process was, well, I would really want to read the book. I want to enjoy the book, but should I watch the show first or should I read the book first? Is it going to, ruin it for me if I read the book, if I watch the show, then go back to read the book? That actually ended up not being the case. I ended up not needing to be a concern of mine. So if you're a person who thinks like that, and maybe you're thinking about watching it and you're like, well, I don't want to spoil the book, I would say don't worry about it, because first off, they are so different that I think there's a lot of things that I knew were coming around the corner, I'll say, when I read the book. But because I didn't realize how different it was, there's things that were missing, things I was waiting for that never happened. Like I was waiting for certain characters to get introduced that never got introduced. And I was like, oh, okay, because there's certain characters I was like, oh, I wonder how this character is in the book. And I was like, wow. So one thing I'll just start off by saying is like there's way less characters in the book. There's still like a lot of characters, but what I mean is like in the TV show, it centers around like, I don't know, what is it, 5, 6 different people, probably more than that, different characters that's like in this friend group. That friend group is non-existent in the book. And a lot of those people do things that like pretty much I think probably one character does all the different things that multiple of those characters did in their interactions with each other and throughout the show. So I'm gonna go deep into specific examples if you haven't seen it, but like there's certain like there's certain like things that were being studied and talked about that one character did in the TV show that they all had a part, all did different key elements that were important, that in the book was the main character, he did all of it. And that part was interesting because I was like, oh, so basically they didn't, usually, in a TV show, they'll just try to streamline things. That's actually something where they didn't streamline. They actually kind of, I guess, made it a little more, I won't say more complex, but they added more because I think they thought that they needed to have more interesting characters. Because one of the things I've heard people say about the book is that, the characters are, kind of flat and don't do a lot. And I would kind of agree, not that they don't do a lot, but I would agree that they're like the main character in the book definitely isn't someone who I would consider somebody interesting. Like I wouldn't say that was the most interesting main character I've ever read in a book. But at the same time, for me, the story of the story of three body problem is more about the science fiction elements. So that didn't bother me in the book. So that's one area where they diverge so differently. There are things you will recognize that certain characters do in the TV show that you will see the main character in the book do. So you'd be like, okay, yep, I see that. That's cool how they, okay, that's how that came in. But also certain things do play out differently, even if they're hitting some of the same story beats. So for example, there's like a certain romantic relationships that happen in the TV show that don't happen in the book. And there's in one particular case, there are two similar characters, but they don't. And I'm waiting for like, okay, where's the interaction? It's like, oh, okay, well, no, actually that didn't happen in the book. So you can see that they try to, you can see in a TV show where it's like, all right, we're going to add some extra spice here and there. We're going to add some more, I guess you feel like you just kind of need to add some other elements to make the TV show more interesting, maybe make it to an audience for other elements that will appeal. But again, the book is so much more so centered on the science fiction elements of it Not that you can't have that in a sci-fi story too, but I'm just saying this is more along. I don't know if some people would consider it hard science. I would definitely say that three body problem leans more toward hard sci-fi. There's probably people who would still consider that not hard sci-fi. It's hard sci-fi for me, but some people might say, no, that's nothing. But the way that the game in the three body problem works is similar, but it is also little slight differences to that as well. So there's like this artificial intelligence that the characters in the TV show interact with in the game that does not show up in the book when the character is in the game. Now, just kind of like, looking up the stuff and doing a little bit of research, I did find out that that basically the first season of Three Body Problem TV show covers elements that happen in multiple books in this series. So not each book is called Three Body Problem. So there's other books in this series after Three Body Problem. Within that first season, apparently they touch on elements that happen in other books. I haven't read those books yet, so I can't speak to those. So like I said, if you don't want the hard sci-fi stuff, or if you're a person who doesn't like to read or doesn't like reading sci-fi books, I would say don't worry about reading Three Body Problem, because you are still getting the story, and it looks like the TV show is going to be doing its own thing anyway, and it's so different that I think you're missing out on other things, because I like the extra detail and getting more meaning from certain things. And I like the things to be explained in a deeper way. If you liked a lot of the character interactions or some of the drama or things like that happen in a TV show, you're probably fine. Another thing that's very different is that in the TV show, the story takes place in China and the UK, but in other places too. But it's like the primary parts of the story take place in China and the UK, and then in the book it takes place in China. So it's Chinese characters interacting, whereas the cast of the Three Body Problem TV show is very multicultural and takes place in the UK. Ye Wenjie, hopefully I said that right, is one of the main central characters, and she appears in both the book and the TV show. So she's probably the most consistent between both, where there are definitely differences. And one difference that came up with, I feel like they did such a better job of explaining her reasoning for why she makes contact in the first place in the book than in the TV show. Not that it wasn't there in the TV show, but watching it, I always felt like it didn't make sense. It just seemed like to me, where I was like, why did you do that? Like, why would you do this? In the book, I just really felt like they did such a good job of adding in little foreshadowing moments. People would say certain things. You would read a book that had this specific line in it that was like, that's why she did it. And I was like, they did a good job to me of leading up to her decision to do it. And they also do a good job of doing a fake out, because I 100% thought that she didn't do it at one point. I said, oh, is that another difference in the book? But she, anyways, if you read the book, you will see what I'm talking about. One of the other main differences is the names of the alien, as the name of the alien species that they come in contact with in the series, which is the scifi in the TV show, and then the Trilosarans in the book. I'm going to say scifi because I'm assuming you're coming from watching the TV show or getting ready to, but in the book they're called the Trilosarans. So they actually show what happens on the other side of Ye Wenjie's message to the scifi, and basically the response and what takes place, but from the scifi's side of the story. So we hear the scifi side of the story in the TV show through them talking to the people who are basically on Earth, who are wanting to help them come to Earth and help them invade Earth. But it was cool because in the book, you still get that to a degree. I mean, because in the book, it still does what the TV show does in ways. But it was actually so cool for me to actually read and see from the scifi and actually see how their world works, because we've been seeing a lot of their history play out in the Three Body Problem game. But it was cool to now, I can't actually see them because obviously it's a book. I'm reading the book, so it's words on a page. But it was still cool to read from their perspective and read them talking about what it was like for their people when they have to dehydrate the civilization, or living in a stable era versus living in a chaotic era. And all in all, to sum it up, I think that it's worth it if you like to read books and you're a fan of science fiction books. I say go for it, because in a way, honestly, you're getting a whole new experience. You're going to know the main story beats before they happen, but the way they happen are very different, and they go into more detail for certain characters like Ye Wenjie. And even though the main character of the book is not the same main character or main characters in a TV show, it's still cool to see some of those elements play out. But yeah, I definitely say it's worth reading the book if you haven't. I'm going to actually continue the series now, because now I find myself being a fan of the books as well as the TV show. So I probably will try to finish the books before the second season comes out, assuming they keep making them, which I believe they are. But assuming that they keep going with the show, I'm going to probably go ahead and try to finish the books, and I might do another video, another recap like this, kind of explaining more about the differences and how they kind of play out and what my thoughts are on it. But that's it for this video. If you want to see, if you like this kind of content, definitely subscribe for more. I mentioned my previous video before, but definitely go check it out, because I do a similar breakdown on video game adaptations to TV shows. So if you like talking about adaptations from one form of media to another, definitely check that video out as well. But yeah, that's it for this one. Until next time, peace.